The afternoon sun was dipping behind the tall glass buildings when Adrian Hale realized he had stepped into a moment that would change everything. He didn't know how or why, but something in the air felt heavy, urgent, as if fate had grabbed him by the collar. He had only come to the Riverside Cafe to pick up a treat for his daughter after a long morning of work, yet the universe had placed him exactly where he needed to be. Because just a few feet away, at a sleek marble table near the window, a woman with trembling hands and eyes full of discomfort was trying, politely, painfully, to pull away from a man who refused to take no for an answer. And before Adrian could question anything, before he could think about consequences or appearances, he knew he had to step in. If you're someone who believes in kindness, humanity, and second chances, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Tales. Your support keeps these stories alive. Adrian walked toward the table, unsure what he would even say. His heartbeat hammered through his chest, not from fear but from a sense of responsibility he couldn't ignore. The woman looked desperate, cornered by a man whose pressed suit and slick smile carried entitlement rather than charm. As Adrian approached, the man turned his head sharply, annoyed by the interruption. But Adrian wasn't looking at him. His focus remained on the woman, her eyes a silent plea for help she hadn't dared to voice aloud. So he gave her the lifeline he himself would want someone to give his own daughter someday. In a steady, gentle voice, he said, "Sorry I'm late. Are you ready to go?" The woman blinked twice, shocked, then relief washed over her like a breaking wave. She nodded quickly and stood up as if she had just been released from a cage. The pushy man at the table scoffed and muttered under his breath, but neither of them turned back. The woman followed Adrian out of the cafe, and only when they reached the sidewalk did she finally exhale the breath she had been holding. For a moment, the world around them seemed to stop, the breeze, the chatter, the traffic, everything softened as if giving her space to recover. She thanked him with genuine gratitude trembling in her voice, and even though Adrian had no idea who she was, he could already sense that she carried a story heavier than her elegant posture suggested. Her name was Serafina Lane, though she didn't mention the last name at first. Adrian, being humble and never assuming things, introduced himself simply, without embellishment, as though his life were nothing more than just another ordinary chapter. But Serafina noticed things others didn't take time to see. She saw the weariness tucked beneath his eyes, the kind carved by long nights and responsibilities he carried alone. She saw the strength in his calmness, the sincerity in the way he stood between her and danger without wanting applause. She saw a man unlike anyone in the world she lived in, the world of boardrooms, limousines, and people with polished smiles but hollow hearts. Adrian wasn't aware of her stolen glances or the admiration growing quietly behind her shy expressions. To him, she seemed like a woman thankful for a moment of help. He wished her well and began to walk away, planning to return to the construction job he had paused earlier in the day. But Serafina called out to him, asking if she could at least buy him a coffee as thanks. Adrian hesitated. Part of him wanted to refuse. He had learned to keep life simple, avoid complications, but another part of him, the human part that had been starved of companionship since losing his wife 3 years ago, felt a gentle tug to stay just a moment longer. They walked to a small cafe across the street, quieter and warmer than the glossy place they had escaped. The sunlight filtered through golden curtains, spilling softly over the wooden tables. Serafina asked him about his life, and Adrian answered truthfully, though humbly. He told her about his daughter, Ava, about his work, and about how life had felt like climbing uphill barefoot ever since the tragedy that had rewritten his world. Serafina listened with sincerity rarely seen in people from her social circle. And Adrian, unaware of her wealth, her empire, or the article-worthy identity she hid behind modest clothing, treated her simply as a person, a woman who deserved kindness. What Serafina didn't tell him that day was who she truly was. That she was the heir of Lane Global, one of the most powerful business families in the region. That her face occasionally appeared in financial magazines, though she herself hated the publicity. That the man she had tried to escape from had been a business associate her family had introduced for potential partnership, and that she had been suffocating under expectations she never agreed to. She didn't reveal any of that because Adrian's presence was the first breath of freedom she had felt in months. With him, she was just Serafina, not the billionaire, not the business icon, not the legacy. Their conversation stretched longer than either expected. Adrian found himself smiling more than he had in years, and Serafina found herself laughing, a sound she had nearly forgotten belonged to her. When they parted, something unspoken lingered between them, something soft and promising. Serafina walked away with a heart beating faster than she understood, while Adrian returned home with Ava and realized he had spent the entire day thinking about a stranger whose trust he had earned in an instant. Over the next few weeks, their paths crossed again, and again. Serafina found excuses to visit the small neighborhood park near Adrian's home, and he, though reserved, never failed to greet her with that quiet warmth she had come to seek. Ava adored her instantly, and Serafina felt something bloom inside her as she watched the little girl cling to her hand. She had everything money could buy, yet she had never felt the closeness, the realness, the simple love that radiated from this tiny family. As their bond grew deeper, the differences between their worlds began to loom over them. Adrian remained unaware of her background until one afternoon, when a black luxury car pulled up beside her while she and Ava were feeding ducks by the pond. A suited driver stepped out and addressed her as Mississippi Lane, bowing respectfully. Adrian froze in shock as pieces of a truth he hadn't even considered began aligning before him. Serafina saw the hurt in his eyes, the fear that he was just an episode in her life, a small kindness she appreciated but would eventually forget. She explained everything with trembling honesty, telling him she hadn't lied but simply wished to be ordinary with him, even for a short while. Adrian didn't get angry. That wasn't in his nature. But he stepped back emotionally, convinced their worlds could never weave into one. He had responsibilities, a child, a humble life built with tired hands, and she had an empire waiting for her command. Serafina, however, was not willing to let him walk away. For the first time in her life, money, power, and influence meant nothing. All she wanted was the man who had protected her without knowing her worth, the man who had looked at her like she was human, not a business asset. She began showing up more often, not with grandeur but with sincerity. She helped Adrian fix his old wooden fence, attended school events with Ava, sat with them during simple home-cooked meals where laughter mattered more than ingredients. Slowly, Adrian began to see that she wasn't defined by her wealth. She was the same woman he had pulled out of a difficult situation, the same heart he had connected with before knowing anything about her last name. And in that quiet realization, love found its place, unannounced yet undeniable. One bright afternoon, while Ava played under the blossoming trees, Serafina finally admitted how deeply she had fallen for him. Her hands shook, her voice broke, and her heart lay bare in a way she had never allowed before. Adrian stepped closer, cupping her face gently, and whispered that he had been fighting the same feelings, afraid of losing something so precious. In that moment, the world felt lighter, brighter, as if destiny had been holding its breath for them. Their love didn't erase their struggles, but it gave them courage. It gave Adrian hope he thought he would never feel again, and it gave Serafina the kind of happiness money could never buy.